Hello everyone, welcome back to another Weekly Quickie. Today we are following on from last week's topic of managing being a mother and a writer and adding a bit more about my project management methods. So let's get to it. Today's topic is a special request from a good friend and writing pal, Layla. Layla is another romance chick lit / fantasy author who you can currently find on Wattpad. I loved her book Lolita Sway, a chick lit novel about a biracial Englishwoman who's trying to work her way through law school and set up her family for a better life, and she's doing that as a pole dancer. Everything sort of gets out of control when Kaz comes on the scene. That's all I'm going to tell you. If you want to know more, you have to go and read her book. If fantasy is more your read, then definitely check out Layla's mystical tribal fantasy called Malia. I think that's the correct pronunciation. I'm only partway through this one, but I'm really enjoying the world building and research that Layla has put into this story. It's captivating, so go and check it out. Now let's talk about today's topic, which is, of course, Trello. So Trello is a project management app that's free to use. You just have to sign up and start sorting your life. Whether it's going to be projects that you're working on at work, whether it's recipes at home or your reading list, or a storyboard for your writing. Whatever you want to use it for, it's flexible enough to move with you. You make boards for every single project. On each board are lists, and within each list are cards. Within the cards are the details and the checklists, due dates, attachments and notes, or whatever combination, or nothing at all. It's entirely up to you how you use it, which is why I love Trello. There are power-ups available that allow you to connect your board to other apps that you regularly use and to give you a better flow process and managing of tasks if you can connect all those different things up together. Trello is used by some big companies, so obviously it's a good app to be using. I originally came across Trello over 5 years ago when I was looking for a free tool to help me organise my work projects. I used it for myself at work, and then when I started managing a team, I used it to manage their workflows. Eventually, I started using it to manage my writing too. Initially, I used Trello to storyboard and just to keep track of all the different books I had in progress, because I had a lot and it was just building all the time. So eventually the storyboard just became too big, and I recently split it and created 2 boards, one for each of the genres that I write in. So now I have my romance board and my fantasy board. Each list is a different book. The way the cards work within each is different depending on when the story was created. Up until a few years ago, I kept most of my story references in OneNote, and that's where I developed all my character sheets, research notes, etc. And most of them still live in OneNote. Now though, I keep summaries in Trello for easy access, and I link out to my OneNote files so that if I want to go into that greater detail, I can just click out to that link. So if it's just something like remembering a character's name, I just need to click into Trello and I can open it up and the name will be there. But if I need to remember more detail about that character, I can click into my OneNote file and actually gain all that character sheet information. Or if it's the languages that I'm using in each book, I can click in and see what the words are that I've chosen to use. Anything like that, it's all there, it's all accessible from the one app, which is fantastic for me. There is a power app which actually allows Trello and OneNote to talk to each other, so I have to look at that soon and maybe get that functioning as well. You'll notice that the series that I have tend to have a lot more information in them and a lot more connection to OneNote than just my one-offs. My one-offs tend to just have the Trello board. because of the fact that I don't need to track it over a long period of time, and you don't really need to develop your characters over a period of time like you do in a series. In a series, your character is continuously growing, and therefore you need to build on that with each book to grow those characters. In the newer stories, you'll notice I tend to have one card for the characters and story references, and then I might or might not have cards for each scene that I've already plotted. That's actually really, really rare for me to have that. I'm more likely to just have a card referring to notes I want to keep in mind for later scenes. To give you a quick example of how I would set up one of these lists, I'm going to add the novella, which I'd totally forgotten I decided to write, from Sebastian's point of view in my Hierarch series. So I'll create a list and name it to start with. This is, of course, a working title for now. Now, I know that this novella is going to fill the gap between the end of book 4 and the start of book 5 in the Hierarch series. So to remind me of the very first scene in this book, I'm going to create a card with a title to remind me of the opening scene. I also know a few of the main themes of this book, so I'm going to create cards for those. And I know how this book will end, so I'm going to go ahead and put a card for that trigger event in. Now, as you can see, I already have my character sheets in the list for book 5, so instead of remaking those, I'm just going to copy them across. And voila, I've created the storyboard for book 4.5 in the Hierarch series. Now I just have to write it. You might notice the order of my lists. That's to indicate my priorities in which stories I really want to be working on. It doesn't mean it will happen, but I do my best to remind the Muse where we should be focusing instead of coming up with new ideas every single week. So when I started publishing to more than one platform, I wanted a way to keep track of where all my books were, and I connected this with scheduling releases and editing, and recently added on the scheduling of my blogging. Basically, I created a board for the business side of writing. So that's Trello. That's how I use it to assist with managing my work in progress and the editing and publishing side of things. If you have any more questions about Trello or the way I use it, then please fill out the Google form and send it in, and I can answer it next week. If you haven't already guessed, after a reader reached out to ask about the next book in the Hierarch series, the Muse has been flitting around the room like Tinkerbell on speed, flashing scenes at me. She's also been doing the same for Fast Hearts and for Best Layover. Frankly, it was giving me a bit of a headache. So we've been plotting, but not writing this week. So next week will be the May wrap-up. We'll do a quick debrief on everything covered this month of Shadow and Light, being a mum and writing, and Trello. So if you have any burning questions about any of those topics, go ahead and write them. If you have any other burning questions about anything else, please go ahead and submit them to my Google form, and I will answer them all next week. So, this week's questions. Question 1. What app do you use to make timelines for stories, publishing deadlines? Is it helpful? So I think we pretty much covered that today in the fact that I use Trello for the most of it. When I first started writing, I actually used to use Smart Shapes in Word and create full-on timelines with pictures, the whole lot. And I've actually kept those for my series, because when you're writing a series, you need to be able to go back and say, okay, what was the time frame that was happening there? So creating those timelines when you're writing series is still a really good idea. It's good to be able to track your time in a long book or a long series, so that you can remember that it took 6 months and not just a month, or get confused and think it took 2 years when it only took 5 months. So I've kept all of that still, and I still create those long timelines, and I always hash them out so that I do keep track of time in my books as well. I find it really annoying when I'm reading a book and, you know, only a month has passed, but all of a sudden they're saying it's been 3 months or something like that, but it doesn't add up, and it's really obvious when that happens. So I do find Trello really, really helpful, and I think it's a really good project managing app for anything like that. Question 2. Do you use Trello to add or brainstorm story ideas or another app tool? Every new story idea gets its list in Trello. Once I have an idea what the book's going to be called and what it's going to be about, it gets its own list, because potentially I might write the first chapter to a book and then not come back to it for quite a long time, or depending on where I am in some other books. So quite often I'll be standing there and I'll get a great idea for a new book, or I'll have a dream, wake up in the morning, have had a dream, but at that point in time I'm intensively working on another book. So what I'll do is I'll quickly hash that out and then get back onto whatever I was working on, so that that idea is there to come back to at a later date. Question 3. How much research do you do before writing? Not very much at all. When I initially start, because most of my ideas come from dreams, I usually just sit down, write the first couple of chapters, and that's when it starts. So with Fast Hearts, let's use a recent example. I literally had the dream, got up, wrote out the first chapter. I was halfway through writing the second chapter when I went, I actually need to have a bit more understanding of this scenario, of this scene, of this lifestyle. And so I'm going to go off and watch a few, documentaries on street racing or other sort of things along those lines. So I usually don't do research on a book until I'm at that point in the book where I want that information, and then I will go off and do the research on it. So even when I was writing the Hierarch series and I was looking into necromancy and shamanism, etc., until I got up to the point where Finn was actually learning about necromancy, I didn't actually go and research it. At that point where she started doing her lessons with Sabine is when I stopped writing and I went off and learnt a hell of a lot about the mystic arts. And I kept a lot of research notes. At that point in time, I used to handwrite them all. And so I had a book, and I still have the book somewhere, with all those research notes about necromancy and shamanism and enchanting, etc. It's all there still for me to go back and refer to. The main points of that research I then put into my OneNote so that I could come back at any time and look it up and be able to refer back to it while writing the series. But basically, I don't do any research to start with. My research starts when I need that information. And quite often, I'll be in-depth in the research and I'll get carried away with it. And then I'll sort of stop and go, I actually don't need to have that much information because I can't cram that all in the book. And the reader doesn't really need to know that much extra. And so 90% of what I actually research doesn't end up ever making it into a book. But I have that knowledge there, and that knowledge may end up popping up later on in another story and being used over there. Sort of like some of the stuff that I'd researched for Hierarch series turned up in the Chaos series. So yeah, that's how I handle my researching. It's not a planned thing, and it just happens on the spur of the moment as I need that information. Question 4. What are your favourite apps, software that you can't live without when writing or preparing a new story? Well, the first thing that happens when I get a new idea is I open my Simple Note, which is an app that you can have on any device or a web page, and I write out the first couple of scenes. So usually the first 10 chapters of a book will go into Simple Note. I don't actually put it over into my proper writing thing until I know that it's going to go further than those first 10 chapters, because the amount of times I've only written 3 or 4 chapters in a book and then it's sat there stagnant, I just can't be bothered setting up an entirely new file and creating the whole format and everything unless I know something's going to happen with that book. So the first app I always use is Simple Note. Then once I've got those couple of chapters down, I will create my Trello list for that book. And then once I've got at least 10 chapters in the story, I then start writing it on Scrivener. I love Scrivener. I will swear by Scrivener. The other reason I really, really like Scrivener, other than the fact that you can totally format out, put all your research notes, your character notes and everything in there as well, is the fact that once you have finished your book, if you're a self-publishing person, you can do all your formatting in Scrivener and actually create your ebook from Scrivener, which you can upload to Amazon. So I think Scrivener is really, really good for any self-published indie authors out there, but I think it's also just a really good app for using for writing. I was using Scrivener first, and I actually only started using Simple Note because of the fact that Scrivener wasn't available on a portable device at the time. It was only available on your computer. And I do a lot of writing while I'm not at home when I can't access my computer. So for me, I needed something that was portable, and that's how I started using Simple Note. And then I would copy and paste it into Scrivener when I got to that point. And that habit has just stuck, even now that I have Scrivener on my portable device and I can just go in and start writing it on it. I still start in Simple Note when I'm starting a new book. It's just how it's worked for me. So, yes. Question 5. This one is about Of Shadow and Light. So, in Of Shadow and Light, over the past 6 months, so we're referring to the fact that the last chapter had a bit of a 6-month jump in time, or has sort of given a summary of what happened over the last 6 months. So over the last 6 months, has Ty been taking Mess to the club? If so, why aren't the Sealy trying to kidnap her there? So other than that one time that Ty took her to the club and the Sealys used that to try and get to her, she hasn't actually gone to the club again. In fact, other than Friday afternoons when she does her runs, and on the odd occasion that she is escorted by Escher to the kitchen, she hasn't left Tynan's suites. So she's actually starting to become a little bit agoraphobic because she's used to being in those suites now, and stepping outside of them is becoming a scary thing for her, which might or might not be part of the plan for Tynan, considering they know how good she is at disappearing. Question 6. Now, I've had to blank out names in this one because I think if I leave them in there, it will give away for people who haven't figured out this plot twist yet in a particular series that I'm not going to name. So this question has a few blanks in it so that I can answer it but not give it away for people who haven't figured out this twist yet. So how is blank now blank's daughter? The person who asked the question will know, and a few other people will know who happen to be on a group for one of my fan pages where the question was also raised. But for now, I'm going to answer this as vaguely as possible so the person who asked it gets the answer. So how is that person, now this person's daughter, is relation to the fact that we always thought these two people were this person's biological parents, and they still are. They are still the biological parents. Now, it was interesting to see some of the other readers answer this, in the fact that they then went, well, because he's been on the scene of her life for so long, he has seen her grow up and that's why he sees her as his daughter. Now, I don't think anywhere along the line have they ever actually said that this person is this person's father or real father. He calls her a child. He treats her like one, and in the last scene that we saw him, he told her that his interest in her wasn't sexual. And so I think the assumption has been made that because he doesn't want to have sex with her, that's because they're related. I'm going to say that it's a supernatural story. Anything is possible. He may be her real biological father. And it may be that because of who he is, he was able to, let's say, possess her biological father during the mating and produce offspring. That could be how it happened. Or it could just be that he has seen her since she was a child grow up and has feelings for her that way. Or perhaps he knows something else about this person and getting in a relationship with her or tying himself to her in that way would be detrimental for both of them. And so he's keeping it clean. And so looking at her like a daughter enables him to keep it clean. There's a lot of different ways that could be seen, I guess. And no, I'm not actually going to tell you the true answer because it will come out eventually. But right now, there is the potential that, yes, what you're theorising is correct. And I might have been hinting at that all the way along. Or maybe not. I'm terrible. Okay, so that's all I have for you now. Thank you for watching. Don't forget to send your questions in by Wednesday to see them answered next Sunday. Next Sunday is the May wrap-up. You can ask any question you want. Doesn't have to be on any particular topic whatsoever. Have a lovely weekend, and I shall see you all next week. Bye.